Still?
No, we're back in South Carolina,
Oh, okay.
but the plot of land that Mary Ann, my wife, picked out is great. I can see humans when I look out the front door and nature out the back. I prefer the back.
Yeah. Okay.
All
Seen a
right.
lot of humans in my life.
Hi, everyone. This is another episode of the Biotensegrity Party coming to you on behalf of the Stephen M. Levin Biotensegrity Archive and all volunteer effort from a nonprofit organization that welcomes your donations. I'll just get that out of the way. Today we have a very special episode on the epidemic in injuries in among baseball pitchers. And I'm Susan Lowe Desolorcino coming to you from Washington, D.C. And I'm here with my co-host, Chris Clancy.
Hi, I'm Chris Morita Clancy, coming to you from the unceded territory of the Coast Salish Nation, quite close to Vancouver, BC.
And Graham Scar is from Nottingham, is off today. Steve Levin is here. Hi, Steve.
Hi.
And I am going to turn it over to today's, we have a guest host, Joe Pristula. Anybody who's been watching our tea parties for a while knows Joe well. Well, I'm going to let him introduce himself, and I'm just going to turn it right over to you, Joe.
Super. Hi, everybody. I want to start off with the toast. Okay. To biotensegrity and baseball, perfect together. Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, so I'm really excited about today. First of all, a little about myself. Um I've been spent the primary part of my career as the athletic trainer here at Elizabeth Public Schools. Elizabeth is in the Northeast United States. We're about a half hour south of Manhattan. It's the second largest public school in New Jersey. Um, the last 15 years of my career, I've been the supervisor of physical education. All right, so that's my background, and as as part of my employment there, I had the pleasure of meeting Coach Raymond Korn, who's also in attendance today, and he was our baseball coach for I think it was over 40 years, and Ray's a member of the Baseball Coaches Hall of Fame. He has experience at the scholastic level of the at the minor league baseball level, and even a little professional experience. And also, I have one of my former students and players who's now a strength and conditioning coach with a professional baseball organization. So he'll always be in attendance. Um, Now, what I hope comes out of today, because we're not going to really, find all the answers, but I'd really, like an eclectic approach to solving a very complex problem. Because right now it looks like the solutions that we came up with really haven't been working because arm injuries in baseball, they seem to be getting worse. So I want to start off with a little story. So 10 years ago, I went to the first Biotensegrity summit in Virginia, and I started out a little confused, with the whole science behind it. And then in one of the breakout sessions, it was given by a physical therapist that worked with children and with infants, and she was talking about a problem that's a common problem in infants. I guess from being scrunched up in the womb, they kind of have, and I forget the technical name for it, but it's kind of like a torticollis of the neck, where the head's twisted to one side and bent, and they can't turn their head. And the modern treatment for it is really a physical therapist, kind of like trying to twist the head sort of back in place. But this woman proceeded to show me like her way of doing it, the biotensegrity way of doing it. And it was really kind of rearranging the crib, right? And Erb's palsy is the name. Thank you. But there was very little hands-on. She rearranged the crib so that the body would self-organize and the dysfunction would take care of itself. And it was very less traumatic, of course, than the way it was being done. And I thought it would just kind of like, be about forcing the infant to kind of, turn his head in the right direction. But that wasn't it. It was much more complex. And she explained about, to correct the dysfunction, you really have to go deeper into the dysfunction first and kind of use the bounce out of that, to do the correction, if you will. And she had video that she showed of it, and I was just blown away. But 10 years later, I had one of our teachers here that had the same issue with her baby, and I was kind of shocked to find out that they were still doing it the same way, which was like the physical therapist kind of like twisting on the head and the kid screaming and everything. It seemed traumatic. So that's what I'm looking for today. For those those. Don't be afraid to comment and kind of use the experience from your own world in solving this problem. Um, so our special guest today, I'm really psyched about it. I'm really stoked. Is Paul Davis, who is the director of pitching development for the Atlanta Braves. Um, I had met Paul through a mutual colleague of ours, Vern Gambetta. And Vern was nice enough, maybe about 8 years ago, during a layover to stop over at Elizabeth Public Schools and show me some video. And he's really a true student of the game. So without further ado, Paul, can you tell us a little about yourself?
Sure, Joe. So I've loved baseball since I was a kid, and I was a pitcher as I grew up, and then I pitched Division I baseball. Creighton University is where I ended up going. Grew up in Central Florida, and then had a lot of shoulder problems. Probably starting early in college and then chronic shoulder issues. And then I never played professional baseball, started coaching, and I coached younger kids, coached some high school baseball, ended up getting an opportunity to be a head coach at a small college north of Omaha. Did that for 5 years in the late 90s. Very fortunate in 2001, I met Brent Strom, who's been a major league pitching coach for a long time. And we've been friends for the last 2 decades plus. And and then I was really intrigued, always intrigued by pitcher injuries and just, my own experience. And then in late 2012, I was hired by the St. Louis Cardinals as a rookie league pitching coach and did that for a couple of years. Then I was a rehab pitching coach, and then I was a coordinator, kind of overseeing a lot of our things with developing pitchers with the Cardinals. And then 2019, I spent the year as the Seattle Mariners major league pitching coach, and then went to the Braves, and I've been with the Braves. This will be my 6th year now as the director of pitching. So I oversee all of our minor league guys and 40-man pitchers who are in AAA. So
And then, Paul, you have a family yourself, right?
I do. I do have 2 sons, and my older son works in professional baseball. He's works in the front office of the Milwaukee Brewers.
Okay. Um, and you're also a golfer, correct?
I am a golfer,
Yeah.
avid golfer.
And I know when I hear you speak, about baseball injuries, you kind of, use some golf concepts in there.
Yes, I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of similarities between throwing and striking anything. And I've tried to learn from track and field and golf and baseball hitting, and just anything looking at how the best in the world would move.
Okay. Paul, you're familiar with Serge Grosovetsky's work. Can you
Yes.
tell us a little about that, of how it, it informs, what you do?
Well, so I was initially exposed to Grekovetsky's work from a friend of mine, a guy who I had was introduced to. I somehow I forget how, but his name is Gavin McMillan, and Gavin was in Southern California in Irvine. He had a place called Sports Science Lab, and he was far beyond anyone that I had ever met as far as training athletes, and um, used the ideas of Grekovetsky and did a lot of eccentric and isokinetic training. Um, a huge influence on my career in professional baseball. And so, and then I did a lot of, for my own personal training, I started doing a lot of Pilates training and had some teachers just here in Omaha. And so, I've been really interested in the role of fascia and how that connects things. And again, looking at the best throwing and striking athletes in the world and um, trying to simplify things. I think we've gotten away from, as I mentioned to Susan earlier. I think a lot of, if you will, all-time greats in baseball, that they moved exceptionally well, and they didn't have, quote, sports science to inform them with what they did.
So, what are your job responsibilities now, Paul?
So essentially, I oversee, you could call me the CEO of our pitching development. That once a pitcher is signed, they sign a professional contract with us, then I'm overseeing the process of development. I'm creating strategy as far as pitch development and pitch usage, but also looking at how that pitcher moves, if we need to make some adjustments to their delivery, because we have concerns. And we have a lot of information. I have a lot of information, video that I've acquired, taken. If we have concerns about injury or the inability to throw enough strikes at the professional level, or the inability to throw, um, good enough non-fastballs, if you will, sliders, curveballs, changeups, that type of stuff. So really, once a guy signs, I'm kind of overseeing that process. And we have, for those that aren't familiar, we have probably about 100 pitchers that I oversee, and they range in age from 17 to could be 30-year-old guys. And they could be playing in the Dominican in a rookie league. They could be playing in a rookie league at our complex in Florida, um, or at one of our 4 full season affiliates that every professional team has. And so then during the season, I'm traveling around uh, those affiliates, and again, kind of looking at what this guy is doing, what each pitcher is doing, and our plan for them to try and develop them from a minor league pitcher to a major league pitcher that you would see on TV, and help us win games at the major league level.
Okay. And what type of equipment do you have at your disposal, to do that type of thing?
Well, we have high-speed edgertronic cameras in all of our affiliates, and that video is gathered. Every pitch that a pitcher throws, we would have one, two, three. We have 4 angles. That video is cataloged that I have at my disposal, typically the day after they pitch, or maybe 2 days after. Um, and then over the course of a season, over the course of their career, that I could pull up any one of those pitches. And then we have pitch tracking information. So everything about that pitch, the way that it moved, we know that. We can compare different time frames. And pretty much every team has this information now. We have what you could call a lab down at our complex in Florida, where we have a special mound that can gather some force information in multiple planes, high-speed cameras, and we have several of those at our affiliates. So we have lots of information that we can use.
Yeah. Yeah, Paul, we have a lot of people attending here that are from from Europe. So, can you tell us and give us a little bit of an overview about how baseball pitching differs from other type of throwing? Than say throwing a javelin or a cricket bowler, that type of thing.
Sure. The biggest difference that separates a baseball pitcher from any other thrower in sport is that baseball pitchers have to throw downhill. So the pitcher's mound is 60 feet 6 inches away from home plate, and it slopes 1 inch downhill per every foot. So by the time you get, 8 feet down the mound, it is at around 5 feet 5 inches or so. Or I'm sorry, it's so that the pitcher's mound is 10 feet or 10 inches, and then it's going to be 5 inches, 6 inches below when you get down to 7 feet. And so it's that gradual slope that creates some momentum, allows pitchers to use gravity, but gravity is also working on them. Um, so that's one of the biggest things. They can't run, okay, like a javelin thrower or a cricket bowler. You can wind up, but you have to have your foot on the back on the rubber. If you're right-handed, it would be your right foot. So that's a little different. And then obviously, if you have a runner on base, you need to have an abbreviated wind up, if you will, because you don't want the runner to steal. So that's a factor that makes things a little more difficult as well.
Okay, it's now it's something came into mind, just kind of popped in my head. Now even over the years, mounds have changed. Like now, a lot of, at least on the scholastic level, a lot of them are artificial. Does that change much or anything of anything?
That's a really good question. I think it does because the fields that many kids grow up on, um, whether it's in the United States or especially what I see in Latin America, that those fields are not professionally manicured. A professional mound has a base of a hard clay underneath that is extremely firm. And so it's almost like moving and throwing on concrete. There's some give to it. Pitchers wear spikes like all baseball players so that they can really get their footing. But a lot of amateur pitchers are pitching on mounds that have big holes near the rubber. They have big holes where the pitchers keep landing, and that certainly can affect then how they move. Um, and so I think that that's a big difference. Yeah.
Joe, just to speak about what Paul said, for the years that I was in high school coaching, we were the only ones with a mound that actually had clay in the rubber and clay at the landing zone. So being a young coach and being headstrong, I actually bought a bag of clay on the road, and if we went to a field that we were playing on at another high school, I reclayed the mound for my pitcher before he started. And needless to say, because kids were pitching with holes in the rubber, they would kick out all the clay before we even started.
Wow.
But it's true, that 10-inch drop is critical for a pitcher.
Mm.
I'm not a big fan of long toss. I worked with a former pitcher of mine today, matter of fact, you were with the Mariners, Paul. Is it kid named Trent Thornton. Uh,
Okay.
Trent is a high spin guy, and he said when he's throwing 300 feet, he can throw 90. When he's up to 380 feet, he's up around 95, 96. And I kind of wonder what effect that has on the pitcher. I never was a big fan of just throwing long to throw long because obviously you're going to have to get under the ball and get some lift under it. But then when we take them to the mound, you're asking them to get over the ball and throw downhill. My long toss usually doesn't exceed 90 feet, and I want them to stay over the ball, okay, and keep their fingers on top of the ball rather than throw 300 feet and develop the kind of hand action that gets your fingers under the ball. Paul, what do you think of this?
One second, but just not to interrupt. But so what Coach Korn is talking about, it's very common in training to do what you call long toss, and it's just what it sounds like. It's really you're really kind of taking sometimes even a running start and just really throwing the ball long. And sometimes it's with some coaches have them throwing it with a big loop. Some want it like a what they call a rope, just going in a straight line. But it's a type of training. Also, Paul, someone wrote a paper on that, and I have it somewhere about Flessig, I think it was, about what Ray's talking about, and he does not belong. He does not believe in long toss as a conditioning method. I'll see if I could dig it up and throw it in
Well,
the chat.
Oh,
But anyway,
hold
go
on.
ahead. Go ahead.
I'm going to interrupt just a second. Joe, I don't think you've introduced Coach Korn. So you might want to tell everybody who Coach Korn is.
I did in the beginning.
You told us
Yeah, when he first
before
came
we
on.
went
Yeah,
online. You did?
yeah,
yeah.
yes.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Okay. Sorry. Okay.
So,
Yeah,
I'll answer the question about long toss. So I am actually I'm the opposite way, Coach.
yeah,
I I believe that long toss can have a valuable function, and I think it's similar to, again, shot putters or javelin throwers who try to throw far. That's what they do. And the argument that Joe, points out that certain biomechanists and athletic training people have argued that it's different. Well, it is different. Okay. And I certainly admit that, because if you are long tossing, and actually any throwing that a pitcher does on flat ground, which would be in an outfield or anywhere other than the mound on a baseball field, is different than what they do on the mound. Okay, the mound is the only place that they're throwing downhill. Now, to throw, again, using shot putters, javelin throwers, if you want to throw far, you have to throw fast, hard, if you will. Okay, the whatever you're throwing, it could be a football. It can't go far if your arm's not moving fast. And to move your arm fast, you're going to have to organize your body in order to sequence things correctly. And so, you know, I'm a fan of using long toss. Now, it doesn't mean that that's the only thing, obviously. Okay. I try and look at it as throwing practice. That pitchers, first and foremost, pitchers are throwers. But yet they're the most unique throwers, and that their actual game, if you will, is to be on that mound and have to throw a 5-ounce round object into a zone that is probably no more than 18 inches wide and 2 feet high. And so that's a specialized skill in and of itself. But so long story short, I look at throwing, or long, if you want to call it long toss, it's just throwing practice that pitchers need to be able to do. And most kids, and in fact, I have people all the time that will ask me, could you help my 11-year-old or 12 or 14-year-old? And I say, if you want to help young kids learn to throw, take them out on a field and see how far they can throw, and just work on that. because whatever position you're going to play, if you're an outfielder and the ball is hit in the gap and you have to throw it into second base, it's probably going to be a 240 or 50-foot throw. So that's kind of my position on long tossing.
Yeah, we got ahead a little bit ahead of ourselves here, kind of,
Yeah.
talking about, training and that type of thing. But we're going to get to that in a little bit. In the chat box, by the way, I put the link to a PDF of Flessig's article if everyone wants to download it and read it later. So continuing on, a great question, Coach, by the way. Um, so Paul, can you tell us a little bit about the phases of pitching? Could you show us some video and maybe the
Sure.
critical moments of like when these type of injuries take place?
Sure. I'll let me share my screen here. And I'm going to use all right. So this is Max Scherzer, who, for those of you who aren't familiar, he's 41 years old. He's been an all-star pitcher, Hall of Fame pitcher. So what I like to look at, and I'm gonna stop it here, Joe, at the phases that I like to look at.
Oh, we're not seeing the video itself. We're seeing the series of shots of the videos.
Okay, so you don't see the video
Yeah,
of
we could,
Max Scherzer.
Paul, we could see the thumbnails, but we can't see the video playing.
Huh, okay,
Can we
because
click on it?
it's on my screen here.
Yeah, what you could do, Paul,
Okay.
is stop screen share, start again, and make
Yeah.
sure you choose the window you want. Yeah.
Ah, okay. All right, so you see that?
We see the thumbnail.
Thumbnail.
Okay, hang on here. I think I know what I got to do. I'm a little not used to. Now do you see it?
Yes.
Yeah, we
Okay.
got it now, Paul.
There we go. Okay, so I'll talk about the points that I like to look at. Okay, that at the top of a pitcher's leg lift. So this is where, he starts here, his wind up, and he gets to the top of his leg lift. And so if you look at this, he's on his back leg solely. His head is pretty much over that foot. You look at where his pelvis is, it's kind of neutral, maybe tilted slightly up. Okay, and then I like to look at, and this is one of the things that I'm interested personally in sharing with you all to hear, what any fascia experts would have to say, is that I've tried to simplify the act of throwing into, I believe it's loading the body and unloading the body. And so at about right here, that's the point where I say he has loaded his body. And I've come to this through using the mound that I mentioned that shows us force in 3 planes. Because at this point, he is at the maximum amount of down force, and it's coming from his back leg. And you can see there's some flexion in his hip, and look at the position of his pelvis, if you will. His hips are both slightly externally rotated. His shoulders are slightly internally rotated. His scaps are in a certain position. And so now, once a pitcher has loaded his body, he simply needs to unload. And what happens is there is a sequence in which there's a slight horizontal movement right there. Now the pitcher begins to rotate. And now the front foot hits the ground, and there is a large vertical force produced and he's transferred his weight. There is little to no weight on that right foot, on his back foot. It's all in the front foot. And so now he creates a massive vertical force into ball release. Max Scherzer has one of the best deliveries of the last 25 years at least. He's pitched for an extremely long time. He's had some injuries in the last few years. Simply, my belief is he's gotten older. He's a little heavier. This video was taken in 2017 when he was probably around his peak. And if I were to look at, and I have some video, if you want to see it of some guys who aren't as good, who've had a litany of injuries, we could look at that, Joe.
Um,
Or
can
you, do you
show
have, do you
just
have
one-
questions? Go ahead.
Can you-
Questions here.
Can you just replay it so we could just see it in just kind of one like
Yeah.
speed motion? Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
here
you.
you go.
You know, it's interesting, Paul. Just because of the type of pitcher he is, normally when that lead foot, the block foot hits, your elbow
Mhm.
should be at its highest point. Watch where his highest point is on his throwing elbow. You see
So
where it's not very high?
yes, so this is
Interesting.
yeah, this is a good question. Okay, so Joe, for those out there, and it's a good point, but so what I would say, Coach, is if you look here, and again, we're looking at a two-dimensional video,
Yeah.
but his humerus
Mhm.
is centered in the humeral socket.
Right.
Okay? Because of this slight little tilt. And again, because a pitcher is throwing downhill, at this point, he would need to have his spine tilted slightly back, okay, in this manner. Now, so his humerus stays centered, and that's really key to throwing effectively.
Yeah. You know, it took him a while to get to the big leagues. I think because there's a lot going on in his delivery.
Well,
You know,
I think he got to the major leagues fairly quickly after he was drafted, and he's unique in that he was traded by the Arizona Diamondbacks because several people in their front office and their decision makers believed that his injury or his delivery was poor, and it was violent, and it was
Yeah.
problematic, and it would lead to injury. Well,
Yeah.
multiple Cy Young awards and 200 plus inning seasons in a Hall of Fame career later,
Yeah.
he's never had a major injury to his throwing
No.
arm.
And you know what? He's a throwback years ago when everybody had a full over the back of the head type of
Mhm.
delivery. Now it's a modified delivery. Go to your glove, get out of your glove, get it up and get it going forward. You know?
Yes.
Paul, could you show us just kind of maybe play it one more time? You show us the critical points in the delivery where the injuries are thought to happen, to the shoulder, the elbow, and
Yeah. So if I get it to about right here, and so as a pitcher would then start accelerating the ball. Okay, so once the foot hits the ground, and if you do things correctly, and as you see Scherzer do, his front knee extends. So about right here, there is a large amount of valgus torque that can be placed on the elbow, because if you think about it, as he's moving, even though the ball is only 5 ounces, and as the pitcher goes into external rotation, it's as if the ball weighs much more than that. Okay, it's like the ball is pulling here. And so the UCL right here is going to undergo a lot of stress because of this torque. But what Scherzer does, and again, I'm showing here, so he begins rotating his front shoulder, and he doesn't have, if we were to measure his external rotation of his shoulder at this point, it's really not that much. Okay, it's maybe what, 110, 120 degrees. And he gets to maximum external rotation right here. And again, his humerus is centered in the socket, and his look at his posture. Okay, and for the experts out there in fascia, I think he's in a remarkable position here. It's like all of the lines are tight. And so now at ball release and slightly beyond, and I can't go frame by frame here, but so there's also a large force placed on the elbow at ball release and right after. Okay. And right there, you can see what he has done. And this happens because of the way he had moved through the delivery. You see this beautiful line. If we were to go from his hand through, there is thoracic flexion. Okay, you can imagine where his scapula is, and how the muscles of the rotator cuff are decelerating his arm. And then look at this line, this little circle, if you will. And now he's used that front leg, the posterior chain, to slow his body down. And that's really because of all the things that he did beforehand. So those to me those are the critical areas of the delivery.
Yeah, and Paul, just a note there. What I like to see, and some here too, is the scapula being flat on the rib cage,
Mm-hmm.
and not starting, to wing up. I've always thought that was kind of a sign that they're losing the stabilization battle. So everything's kind of like moving everything's moving in sync here. So. Yeah. So, okay. So that's really when you talk about one of the main injuries, the ulnar collateral ligament injuries, that's really what you're talking about there as part of that windup, right?
Yeah. So, one of the things that my view is, right here, there's no stress on your arm at all. Okay. And even right here, there's no stress on your arm. But it's how you get to this position and where the humerus is and how you are sequencing that really plays a big factor. And I think, one of my thoughts, and I will, share, I took video of Scherzer for the first time in 2015, and it was an epiphany to me because he was so different from what I saw other pitchers doing. And I think that's certainly it's helped him stay healthy. But I think because he's so different, it was misunderstood as being bad. And, to Ray's point, his delivery was kind of a throwback. I personally believe that Max Scherzer tried to copy Greg Maddox's delivery.
Mhm.
Never asked him, but that's my belief because there are many similarities in how they move.
There was a lot of great pitchers years ago that had that full over the back of the head. Even as recently as like 20 years ago, Jim Palmer was like that,
Hmm.
and he lasted. But the amazing thing, Paul, is I think athletes played more than one sport years ago.
Yes.
I looked at some of the amount of innings that Palmer and Clemens and Gibson and Ryan and Seaver and all these guys were 280, 300 innings per year and retired because their legs broke down. Their arm
Right.
never did.
the number of innings that pitchers throw now is nowhere close to what
No,
pitchers 50 years ago threw.
yeah. Well, one of the differences, if you had a 20-game season, you got a $5,000
Don't
raise.
forget I plugged the machine in, eh?
And now you're talking about millions. So they're a lot more conservative with their starting pitchers now because they're so valuable.
Yeah. So Joe, any other questions, or would you like to see someone who is
Yeah,
not as good?
so next, could you show us some video, Paul, of the of pitchers that are that they're in the major leagues now that tend to stay healthy, and those are that are often injured, and some of the differences in their mechanics.
Um, well, I don't have a lot of video here that I can share of guys who are out there right now that have had long careers. I think it's probably easier if I show a guy who was not healthy. Okay. Is that fine?
Oh yeah, yeah, because we already have an example of of good mechanics. So yeah,
Yeah.
please do.
Okay. So, all right. So I'll let this go through. And I'll explain. This is Matt Harvey, who he's a couple years younger than
Oh,
Scherzer.
you just got your thumbnail again.
Okay. All right. All right. All right. So you can see the thumbnail.
We see the thumbnails, lots of thumbnails.
And now do you see the video or not?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Hang on here. Okay. Let's do this. How about that?
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. So I'll play it. And this is Matt Harvey, as I mentioned. He was kind of a contemporary of Scherzer's. This video was taken in I believe the same year that I took the video of Scherzer. And Matt Harvey had Tommy John surgery. He had I believe thoracic outlet surgery. He had all kinds of things and never made 30 starts in a season, and was essentially done pitching probably 2017 or 18 really was the last year that he pitched any significant amount. And so if I get him to this point here where I think it's probably, if I were to say his maximum, his load, well, look at the difference here in his posture and where his back knee is, his pelvis is. Okay, it's very different. Even if you look at where the ball is, the ball is farther behind. What I have to do to throw this 5-ounce baseball, it needs to go forward. Okay, and so he will swing it back. And now you look at where his back leg is. Okay, it is not stable. It continues to drive forward. Okay, and if you were to look at, if you think of Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, Matt Harvey right there is not in balance. Okay, he has probably each of his two shoulder joints, his two hip joints, the angles of bones are different. He's at a different amount of internal and external rotation. And so now watch what his back foot does. His pelvis is not turning. Okay, and back to your point about where the elbow is. For a long time, so coach, I would say a lot of people thought for a long time that, well, you would need to have your elbow, uh, you know, kind of high at this point, or equal. Well, his humerus is not
Mhm.
really centered in his shoulder joint. Now
Yeah,
he's also slightly more forward. You can see
yeah,
the spine here, he's a little more forward, which is then going to cause some problems.
yeah,
And so if you look right here, okay, look at the posture again, and now think about the torque that he's going to put on his elbow.
yeah. It's
So
almost all like he has to duck his head out of the way to get his arm back up on the backside.
yes, so if you were to see it from the front, his posture would change slightly. And
Hmm.
now look at his back foot is off the ground.
Yeah,
Yeah, Paul, that's a lot of stress on the elbow there.
yeah,
It's almost,
Yes,
yeah, it's and something else there is so he's let go of the ball here, and the knee is still not really straight. When he
correct.
releases it, there's still a great, a lot of bend in that front leg. So he's it's almost like he used up everything he had before he let go of the ball.
Right. So I would look at this and say that he's not really using his body very well. He's having to use his shoulder for the most part. Okay. He's having to use a lot of internal rotation and torque at the shoulder in order to throw the baseball. And now you're opening yourself up to the elbow is going to take a lot of stress. The shoulder,
yeah,
um, the rotator cuff muscles, thoracic outlet is a lot of compression that happens in the shoulder. And Matt Harvey he had just about every injury that there was, and his career did not last very long, even though when he initially made it to the major leagues with the Mets, he was extremely talented, but could not stay healthy.
yeah. It's almost looking like he always has to fight to get up and over the ball, because of
Mhm.
the breakdown in his backside, his knee turning in,
Right.
it's just he pitched well because he had such good physical strength. But all that time it was straining his shoulder and the UCL, but they let him go and keep doing it.
Yeah, and the hard thing is the demands of being a major league starting pitcher
Yeah,
is that you would have to go out and throw 100 pitches every 5 days.
yeah,
And when a guy like him would do that, he's going to have a lot of inflammation, micro tearing in his UCL, and it's very difficult to recover. And now he's going to prepare for his next
hmm,
start. And then he goes out and he pitches 5 days later, and there's more micro trauma. And it's just a vicious cycle that
yeah,
ultimately catches up to guys and something breaks.
yeah. You're going to do that for 6 or 7 months every fifth day.
Coach Korn, we got a question for you from Stephen Scharferman. This is a good one. So, because I've seen it before too. He talks about you mentioned the pitchers of the past not being injured as much, and he said didn't some of them throw with a straight throwing arm, and I remember that there'd be like that there was ones that would kind of like over the overhand
Like an
pitch.
Iron Mike. Yeah. Well, I don't know what to tell him on that, but pitching's evolved because of high-speed film, and if a mother or father ever saw 500 frames per second from Dr. Andrews, they'd never let their kid pitch on the just what happens to the arm during each one of those,
Um,
But the thing is, weight training has a lot to do with it. I think kids are getting too big too fast sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I got to know Ron Guidry pretty well through Jeff Torborg, who just died when he was a Yankee pitching coach. And he was 5'9", 5'10", 160 pounds, and through 98. So I kind of wonder what kind of training they're doing at the high school and the college level or before that, that ultimately results in a shortened career later on. Somebody asked me today, I have a grandson that's 14 that's a very good baseball player. Well, according to some of these statistics that they throw at you after they take your money, and they said, is he a pitcher? I said, he pitches for me. I don't let him pitch in the game. So why not? They said, why are we going to use up all those bullets when he's 14 and 13 years old? He's going to get no coaching if I'm not there, and I'm not there. He's in Colorado, I'm in South Carolina, and have him throw 70, 80 pitches in a little league game when he really doesn't know what he's doing. I said, I'd rather just work with him and say, you know what? When you're 16 and 17, if you want to pitch, now we could start when you're more fully developed. Uh, I don't know, but I mean, they pitched every fourth day. It was a four-man rotation. Now we didn't have the guns. We didn't have all the metrics we have now to see if they pitched every fourth day. And by the time August came, they dropped 4 miles an hour. Their spin rate went down. Their movement was uncontrollable or whatever. But I'm sure they didn't throw as many pitches. I mean, you got guys now. I just spent time at Trent this morning with one of my former pitchers, Trent Thornton, who Paul is now a reliever with the Mariners. Trent is one of the highest spin rate guys there is. All right, that's probably what got him signed. Plus, he's a 95 plus guy. But he's got two fastballs, slider, cutter, sweeper, and said he had a slutter too. I said, what the hell is that? You know, plus a split change because he has trouble pronating. So he could just throw the splitter right over the top. But I said, you got 6 pitches. They didn't throw those many pitches in those
Yeah.
days.
So can you see the video here of Bob Gibson,
Yeah.
Joe? Okay. So
Yeah, everybody watch this. This is an old timer, one of my favorites.
now the argument that a lot of people are making is that the reason why pitchers are getting hurt now is because they're trying to use maximum effort. And they'll say, well, pitchers 50, 60 years ago didn't try to throw hard all the time. And I would argue with anyone that I'm guessing Bob Gibson is trying to throw hard right here. He's moving extremely fast. But I'll stop it. Okay, so if I get him to the point that I like to call the load, got to try and stop it here if I can.
You try to stop it when his foot hits?
Nope. I want to stop it about right there.
Okay.
Okay. So if you look again, look at his posture, okay, where his head is, look at the front foot, okay, look at the symmetry between his front arm and his front leg. And now watch his back foot. Okay, and now watch the front foot and the front hip. How you can kind of see the hips are internally rotating into each other.
Mm-hmm.
And at release, he's in a pretty darn good position there.
Yeah.
And now look at the back hip, and you can see how that back hip is kind of turned into the front, but the front hip is stable. The front foot is stable. So when people would see Gibson and say, "Oh, wow, that's really violent," this guy also never really got hurt, and he pitched for a long, long time. In fact, I just saw someone tweeted this, that in Bob Gibson's career, he threw 122 complete games. And since 2000, the St. Louis Cardinals as an organization have thrown, I think it was 119 complete games.
Yeah.
So
Paul, I think Paul, he
different.
had actually had 18 or 19 complete games in 1 year. And
He
he
had over
was,
20. He had 20 some years.
yeah, he was so good they lowered the mound.
Yeah.
Um, not to change the subject here. So, Gio Caraballo, could you unmute your microphone and ask your question here so you could clarify it?
Yeah, so um someone asked where the force is coming from and what the thought of the role of the front leg is um when pitching. So correct me if I'm wrong, Paul and Coach Horn, but that is the lead leg block, right? That is the kind of the stopping motion for the momentum.
Yes. So if you sequence things correctly, okay, and that's the key piece here. So again, think about what I showed with Scherzer, and now looking at from the front and how Gibson's back leg is stable. His knees pull apart, okay, and now he's going to rotate, and it's really his upper body is rotating, so that when he hits the ground, his pelvis and front hip are in a position where he continues to accelerate the baseball.
Mhm.
The front leg has no choice but for the front knee to extend. Okay. And it's the same when you see the best hitters in the world swing a bat, and it's why they can hit the ball so far. But it's not something that, conscious what you would probably get from a lot of young kids if you said, "Oh, you need to block with that front leg." They'll do it very late and they'll do it after they've released the ball. And so that if the timing is right, what happens is you're putting the maximum amount of force down into the ground at ball release right here. And that's really it's a byproduct of all the things that you did beforehand. And as you turn into the ground, it's having the right sequence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
So, Gio, what happens here is when you land and the leg blocks, that's the end of the linear action in the pitching, delivery, and then the rotational action comes through. So
Yep.
they work together. Big problem I have sometimes, Paul and Gio, is in Cape Cod right now. I've been up there for about 9 years. Is the kids struggle to use their block leg because they don't stay in line.
Well, I'll give you my theory on why a lot of kids struggle to use, let's just say, use their legs.
Hmm.
When I started in pro baseball in 2013, there were no weighted balls being thrown by anyone.
Yeah.
I went to visit one of our top draft picks from a couple years ago. He's one of our best prospects. I went to the college where he came from. I'm not going to say where, but I'm sure that it's no different anywhere else. And I walked into their pitching lab, and immediately what I saw was about 50 or 60 plyo balls, weighted balls on the ground next to the wall. And in the last 10 years, heavy plyo balls have infiltrated because there are some organizations, I will say, some training facilities that have perpetuated this, and they will do these exercises where they don't move their lower body. Okay, they throw these balls against a wall and they're using very, I'll call it funky arm actions. They're using arm actions and throwing motions that do not happen when you pitch, and they don't use their lower body at all. And my belief is that has corrupted a lot of young kids, and these balls have been sold as a device to increase velocity. And I have asked many people, How many of these plyo balls do you think Bob Gibson threw, or Tom Seaver, or Nolan Ryan, or Greg Maddux? They didn't use any of them. And so I think there's been a massive corruption, if you will, of understanding that you have to use your whole body. This is a sequence in the delivery, and you have to be able to control your spine and as you go downhill. And if you do that, if you control your spine, your posture, or as Tom Myers calls it, acture, because it's posture in action, then I think you have stability in fascial lines. And that's where I think the biotensegrity comes into play. Again, look at Gibson here, and if we were to think about Scherzer and just how. Yeah, actually, I've got a video of Nolan Ryan that I want to show Joe, because I think it would maybe the light bulb would go on for some people. Is that okay?
Yeah, please
Sure.
do.
Okay, so
While you're
Hey,
doing
Paul.
that, Paul, every kid I get in the Cape is married to the driveland ball.
Yeah. Paul, I just want to give everyone else a scenario. So last year, I was at single A baseball, and I was hanging out in the dugout with one of our players who had Tommy John already. Um, he's fine now, but he had pitched a few days before consecutive, not a few days consecutively, but he pitched a few days and short turnaround time for him. And he was warmed up and everything, but before he started getting into the game and getting on the mound, he's like, "All right, time to let it rip. Let me get my plyo ball. Either it's gonna stay or it's gonna go." And this is how married some of these young guys are to the concept
mhm.
of plyo balls. He said, every time I get up to go warm up, I throw my plyo ball, and two things are gonna happen. I'm gonna either throw and feel like a small little pop, and then I'll be ready to throw, or I'm gonna feel small pop in my tendon, and I'm gonna need Tommy John all over again.
Yeah,
And it's crazy. Like, he made it through the entire season, but essentially every time he went out there, he was risking, hey, my arm might go, my elbow might go this time. And it really is like they rely on that plyo ball to get the stretch in that tendon and kind of get it warmed up and full send after that. But it really is an epidemic.
yeah,
Yeah. So here's Nolan Ryan, and arguably the hardest thrower of all time. I'll play this couple times here. Um, and he pitched until he was 46 years old. So again, anyone that wants to argue, well, you know, those guys back in the day, they weren't trying to throw hard. He's he's trying to throw hard right here. And he threw more pitches than any man alive.
yep,
And what I want everyone to see here, and the line on his uniform, the lines, the stripe on his shoulder, the stripe down on his pants,
mhm,
is great to watch this. Okay, so I think about right here would be where he would be loaded. Okay, that's probably the maximum amount of flexion that he would have in his back knee and his back hip. Look at the symmetry with his front humerus, front femur. Okay, just look at that. And now watch how as he pushes a little, there's a horizontal, then he rotates, and look at the line. And I don't know if you can see all of it. Look at how that line has elongated. Okay. And he's creating a massive stretch. If you were to think about the stretch from his front hip to his back shoulder, if we were to have this, and Scherzer does the same thing. And so now he's hit the ground and pushes down into the ground. It happens, and look at how he flexes his spine. That's why he pitched until he was 46 years old. So questions or comments, Joe?
Yeah, we're still 94 to 96 at 46.
at
Yeah,
least.
for those in the that are watching, don't know Nolan Ryan. If you're from Europe, he pitched he threw very hard, very fast, and had a very long injury-free career. He was one of the first to bring physical fitness and strength training into baseball. He was always very fit. I don't really know too much about his conditioning, routine. Um, and the other thing is that he's something that is we got to bring up. He lived a healthy lifestyle also. I mean, if you read the book The Arm, I was just amazed at some of the unhealthy lifestyles some of these guys have. For professional athletes, the amount of alcohol, the NSAIDs that they kind of some of them, pop like candy, which can't be good for tensegrity for sure.
Yeah.
Um, Paul, while we're here, now, what kind of anatomical changes happen to the body over the year, the adaptations, the normal adaptations that happen to to the body in pitchers?
Well, what you'll typically see is maybe a laxity in the throwing shoulder. And let's see if I can, if I sit here and this is my right shoulder that I was a right-handed thrower, I I just have a lot of external rotation in my shoulder. And so, like if I then try to put my hand behind me, it's very difficult because I don't have as much internal rotation. Now, and I didn't pitch for that long, but um, I know even looking at some pictures that I have of myself, I was not a good mover. But in general, that's one of the things you will definitely see anatomical changes in pitchers' shoulders. Even guys who are healthy probably have some labral changes. Um, you can have some bony adaptations. Um, pitchers who have elbow problems, a lot of times the guys, even when they have Tommy John or could be before it, they will get bone spurs in the elbow. You can have little micro uh, fractures in the olecranon. That can certainly happen. It happens. It's not uncommon, to Ray's point about young kids pitching that, kind of little leaguer's elbow, it's called, where they have a stress fracture in the olecranon. And, surgeons now will go in and place a pretty long screw in their elbow. We have a couple of guys that happened to. They survived it, and now they're professional pitchers, but it's a little problematic when you're trying to throw baseballs 95 miles an hour and you've got a big screw in there kind of holding some bones together. So those are things that you see as adaptations.
Joe, if I can add to that too, in season, what I've seen from guys is for the throwing arm, typically a kind of drooping of the shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
That's super common, and some things that we try to do is just try to get it back up, try to get the scapula working in sync. T-spine is typically affected. I tend to find guys have pretty crappy T-spine rotation, range of motion, mobility, however you want to call it. And those are two things that I try to look at when I see my pitchers their elbow starts to drop a bit, and try to make a couple changes like structurally through strength and conditioning. Um, those are two things that I've seen right away from guys.
Um, so a question, and I know a lot, everybody has there are a lot of comments in in the that we've got there, and we're definitely going to get to all of those. I just want to make sure that we cover the anatomical part of it first, and the pitching mechanics and that type of thing. So hang on, we're going to get it to everybody's comments, because there's some really good comments in there, and we really do need everyone's contribution. So I got a question there. Paul, to what extent do you think that this increase in velocity has contributed to injuries?
Well, I am not a believer that the increase in velocity is the issue in and of itself. Okay, that I don't believe that throwing hard is the problem. As I said, I have seen a proliferation of guys using weighted balls to try to seek out velocity that I think it's oftentimes the velocity that guys will gain is not sustainable because they're not understanding that I have to use my whole body. I need to sequence this better. Okay. So that's my take on it, is that velocity in and of itself is not the problem per se. It's moving poorly because there were plenty of poor movers, and in fact, I think it's somewhat comical. So the surgery, Tommy John surgery, is named, for those of you who don't know, the first pitcher who ever had his ulnar collateral ligament replaced, in essence, using a tendon. His name was Tommy John. Tommy John was one of the softest throwing pitchers in his era, even before his elbow hurt. He was not a hard thrower. And Nolan Ryan, who was the hardest thrower, never got hurt until he was 46 years old. He finally got hurt and he retired. So that's my take.
Hmm. Paul, now at what point did in time did this or what era did this increase in elbow injuries begin?
Well, I think it's really been it's accelerated in the last 25 years, and certainly within the last 10 years. Um, I saw some data in the last couple days. Since 2000, if you were a pitcher, a professional pitcher that started in 2000 to a guy who started in 2015, okay, in that time period, um, your chances of having a Tommy John surgery in your career, it has more than doubled. And the chances of you making it to the major leagues versus the chances of you having a Tommy John as a professional pitcher are now equal. Okay, so guy signs a professional contract. He's got an equal chance of either having a Tommy John or making it to the majors. That 25, 30 plus years ago, that was not the case. He had a 4 times greater chance of making it to the major leagues. So, one of the questions I guess I would ask, there are more surgeons who can perform Tommy John surgery. I don't know what it would look like. I think there are a lot of guys. I'm 60, going on 61 years old. There are a lot of guys my age group who pitched in high school, college, professional baseball that may have had an elbow injury, but they would rehab it, or they would take time off in the winter, may scar over, they would continue to pitch. Now, at every level of sports, whether it's high school, college, professional, as soon as someone complains of any kind of pain, they go get an MRI. And so I'm not downplaying or making light of the fact that that we have technology that can identify injuries. I think what we, in some ways, and I'm not again making light of the number of injuries, I don't like to see pitchers get hurt, but I think it's quite possible that there were many more injuries 40 or 50 years ago than what we would realize.
Um,
Yeah,
okay, so we got
Paul,
a
they
lot of
don't,
great. Oh, sorry. Did you going to say something,
well,
Coach?
they don't take much time off either anymore.
No, no.
I mean, they're right back at it. I worked today at Tread with one of my kids. Well, he's not a kid, he's been in the big league 7 years. But I mean, he, if you go to the World Series, you pitch till November, and then in December, you're going to start it up again. At the end of December, beginning of January, you're going to start it right back up again. That's not a lot of time to rebuild from all of the probably damage you've done to your overall body, during a 7 month season where you're going to work, 162 to 180 times. I just wonder what they're doing in the off season to rebuild, or do they need to throw as much? Well, Paul, you remember, and I remember certainly, is guys went to spring training to get in shape. Well, you're going to get released now. You're going to spring training in shape and ready to go because they're going to start exhibition games within 7 days. You know, I
Right. Right. Guys, yeah, guys, I think used to take more time off.
yeah.
They would come to spring training to get into shape. Yeah, it's very different. Now, some of that is there is more competition. Um,
Mhm.
Certainly the economics of the game have changed. There's more competition. Um, there are union rules that allow for more movement of players. And there's just more opportunity to make more money, that pitchers can make millions of dollars that uh, guys couldn't make before. So
Yeah.
And
I
then to
mean,
also to throw in now we have and this is more for the Latin ball players, but I mean even the American guys, there's the dead period now. So during the dead period, we're not, as strength and conditioning coaches, we're not allowed to talk to our players to
right,
kind of guide them on what they're doing in the off season. So a lot of guys come back and they're kind of like rushing to get back on the mound or rushing to get back into shape and everything's kind of happening all at once. And Paul, I'm sure you can agree with it. A lot of these Tommy Johns, a lot of these elbow UCL injuries happen right near the end of spring training, where the workload kind of ramps up, and then they blow out before the season starts, or maybe like the first weekend into the season. I'm not sure if you've seen some of the same thing, but the last two organizations I have been with have seen that, where it's spring training comes, everyone's okay, and then the last week or two, guys just blow out.
Can you clarify what the dead period is?
It's a period where the players' union kind of negotiated, and it gives players essentially time to do their
6
own
weeks.
training. Yeah, 6 weeks of time where they can kind of run their own schedule, training, programming, kind of their own life. It gives them a little bit more flexibility so that if, I guess it kind of covers them. Whereas if, as a strength coach, if I'm telling them, hey, I need you to do X, Y, Z throughout the entire season, and let's say some of them go back to the Dominican Republic and they're not getting text messages or WhatsApp or whatever it is, they're still kind of doing what they need to do based on the organization. They're not kind of getting hurt in terms of reputation. So it's just another roadblock to kind of get these guys in shape and keep them in shape. But I mean, it's for them. So
If we're
Um,
going into the Q&A period, we can ask people to turn their cameras on.
Yeah, let's do that right now. Let's because there are a lot of good comments there in the
Yeah.
was a chance to everyone to chime in and you got a good background now. So, from your, personal, or professional background, what are you thinking? Stephen, you had a lot of questions in the a lot of comments there. So,
But I'm wondering if
go
can
ahead.
we hear from Steve Levin first?
Oh, sorry.
I mean, just because
Yeah.
he's
I,
he's
I,
gonna
I
have the
can't,
most informed
I,
insight.
yeah, I can't get my video on for some reason or other.
Let's see if I can.
Hey, Susan, I'm trying to turn my video on, but it says I can't because the host has stopped it.
That'll do it.
Okay. I'm trying to fix things and I'm breaking them. Hold on. There's Steve.
Paul, Paul, say hi to Rick Kranitz for me. He was my boss when I was with the Cubs.
Oh, okay, will do.
Steve, can you unmute? And I'm trying to prompt.
Yeah, I'm on mute, but I can't get the video.
I've tried to send a prompt to you to turn your video on.
Stop my video.
There you go.
There I am. Hello, everybody. Well, first of all, I had to tell you how excited I am to hear what is going on today. It was really marvelous. I have to tell you that I'm probably one of the few people alive who actually saw Joe DiMaggio and play, and I actually was at one game where Bob Feller was pitching. So I go back a long way. Um, so I go back, so I know this is a long time. But what interests me from looking at what was going on was that you have to rethink, at least in my mind, rethinking of where the power comes from. The power comes from the compression of the bones, not the pull of the muscles. And that point where he has all that weight down on one leg and the other leg up in the air, and he's compressing those bones real tight. And he also tightens the muscles, which also pull on the bone and stiffen those bones so they get more spring in it. At the point that he lets go and starts moving up, it moves from the center of mass. So you got things going out from the center of mass. It flies out. So the arms and things are flying out from the center. They're not being powered by the muscles in the way you think they are. Now, the muscles control direction and things like that, but they're not the power. The power comes from the spring of the bones, and the whole system has a tight spring. So it's the unwinding of the spring that you have to think about. And that's what and when you watch that, that's exactly what's happening when you start thinking that way and watch this person pitch, you will see exactly that happen. When that front foot hits the ground, there isn't weight shift yet. That what you're hitting there is the slap of the foot, the accelerating force of that foot coming down. The weight shift doesn't occur until his center of mass then goes over that foot. So it's a center of mass thing that you have to focus on as far as I'm concerned, and understanding that this is an exploding spring and you're just directing the force out the tip of that exploding spring. It's sort of like a slinky going on and then fleeing something out of the end of it. So this whipping the elbow is probably, from the bad training that they're doing early on, throwing those heavy balls and throwing the arm from the arm. The other part of it is from the standpoint of physics, the pitcher isn't throwing downhill; he's throwing pretty flat because the ball is dropping at 9 meters per second. And of course, you throw a fastball and pitching, it's a very short period of time. So he's pretty well throwing the ball flat. While if you're throwing from a distance, you're really throwing the ball up because you have to allow for the ball to fall at that rate of speed. Depending on how long it's going to be up in the air, it's going to fall 9 meters per second. And it doesn't make any difference how fast you throw it, it's still going to fall at the same rate. So really, the pitcher is trying to throw the ball pretty flat rather than throw up in the air as a thrower does from any place else. And so that's part of the physics of what you have to plan on. And that's how I look at it from the biotensegrity standpoint. And you can then play with that as you see fit.
Steve, where does ground reaction force come in for you?
Ground reaction force is when he's got all crunched up and all that weight is on one foot, and his other leg is up, his knee is up in his teeth practically, and he's crunched over. He's forced all that power into the ground, and then you've what you've done is tighten the spring, and the force doesn't come from your muscles. Muscles are internal forces, and can't push you anyplace. You have to get that energy from the ground. So what he's done is dig into the ground. And when you talk about that hard earth, that's exactly what you're talking. When you put that hard clay there, he's pushing against the ground. It's like the difference between running on concrete and running on sand. If you run on sand, of course, you just sink and you don't get that bounce back. When you put that hard clay into the mound, you stiffen the ground so when you hit it, it bounces harder and you're just getting harder bounces, and that's really what you're doing. So you have to think of those kind of physics concepts, and instinctively you've done the right thing by doing that, but it's because of the physics of being able to push against a hard ground. And as I said, he brings, no, most people don't bring that knee up in the air as high as a pitcher does, but a pitcher knows instinctively that if he can get that weight up and then bring it, send it over that center of mass, he can get that spring tighter. And at that moment, when he gets it the tightest, then he lets go and it moves through the center of mass and then spurts out from there. And the rest of the muscles is directing the forces, and the clue is not to rip to get it out to your fingers and not into your elbow.
So, Paul, so with the Newt Force mount that you use, has it been proven that the pitchers who throw faster put more force down into the ground?
No, it's not necessarily more force per se. So there's a mound for those of you, and I won't pull up the graph or show anything, but imagine uh, it's a portable mound. It's the whole thing is censored so that it will show you what kind of force a guy is applying, and it tells us down force, it gives you X, Y, and Z. Okay. And it can measure it. Z force, it's measuring down. Y is from second to home. And then the X force is third to first. So rotational. So if I stand on it, I weigh 195 pounds. If I just stand on it, it will measure 195 pounds of Z force. What we've seen is, yes, in general, the harder throwers will produce, higher amounts of force, but it's not a straight correlation. It's not measured in terms of percentage of body weight. But what I am seeing is that the best movers are the guys who produce a very short span, okay, that with that front foot, it's a rapid acceleration of force. Okay, so the graph is almost straight up. When they hit the ground with their front foot, and this I think gets to Dr. Levin's point, it's the guys that are doing it well, that they're moving, it's the physics, they're moving their center of mass, and it's rapid that it comes out. But again, that's from what they did prior to that. And it's just slower. The graph looks different in guys who aren't as efficient. And sometimes hard throwers can just throw hard, they're not very efficient. And then there's some soft throwers that aren't as efficient too. So, but I agree with what Dr. Levin said. It was a really good point.
Paul, can you say that again? When the front foot goes down, that's when you get the highest read?
Well, so yeah, so when the front foot will hit, and actually let me try and pull up a graph just so everyone can understand this. I think that will help. Let's see. All right, so can you see this here?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
All right, so I'm gonna scroll forward.
It's a lot like reading a force plate, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So here we go. So now oops, sorry. Uh, so I've put some notations on here. So the green is downforce. And so what you see this first green peak, and I circled it, I called this the load phase. Okay, the first green peak that you see is that maximum point that I was showing with Scherzer and other guys, the lowest point that they get with their back leg. Okay. And so then as they begin, then there's a little horizontal push. So you see they have just a teeny bit left with this red line. This is measuring, if you want to call it linear, from home to second. Um, they're shifting their weight. They're taking their center of mass going forward. There's a little of that. Well, then they begin to rotate. And so now right here, as they begin to turn, and you saw this with Scherzer, there's a point there where a pitcher is almost totally in the air and neither foot is on the ground. Okay. But when he hits with his front foot, there's very little force that we see from a down force standpoint. Okay. But now, as soon as he plants that foot, and you see, and this is a guy who's a pretty good mover that I'm using his graph. You see how quickly, and this is, I think every one of, or this little line here is, or what the big line is a tenth of a second. Okay. So, I mean, this guy is going from roughly 60 pounds of force to 420 pounds of force. And that was right at ball release in 7/100ths of a second, something like that, extremely fast. And so this is what I think is critically important. And again, I learned this from Gavin McMillan and everything that he tried to do in training athletes. The best athletes in the world can produce a lot of force in a short period of time. And there's a lot of factors that go into that, but I think that's a simple explanation. So I hope that makes some sense.
That's really useful.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, I like to call it, here you load the body and to Dr. Levin's point, right? It's this spring, right? This tension that you're creating in the center of your body. You load it and then bam, I unload it. And that unloading has a sequence of that horizontal, rotational. The blue line, as a guy begins to rotate, that blue line will change, and then this vertical force. And this has been found in golfers. There's also a company that makes a platform for primarily golfers and baseball hitters, and that's what I've learned from them. So hope that helps.
So loading is loading the body, not loading the ball.
Yes, you have to load the body, and the ball is just in my hand, and
But that transfer moment of the ball out of the hand is coming at or just after that high point of the green line. Is that right?
should coincide that maximum, because again, think about if I'm putting that force down with my front leg and I've sequenced everything correctly, and if my front knee is extending and I'm getting everything coming up through my body, as you saw Scherzer, and you create that beautiful little arc, right, from his foot up through his spine, through his scaps into his arm, and then the ball.
And that ground reaction force is coming up through the body and out into the ball, and it goes.
Yep. And he's accelerating the ball from this point right here at this bottom up until it hits the maximum, and that should coincide with ball release. Now, there's a lot of guys where it doesn't because they're not efficiently moving their body and they're not moving, they're not creating that load into the center. And as Dr. Levin described, exploding out of that. And I like to use the spring analogy as well. It really is like loading a spring. Easier said than done, though.
Coach Korn, in your conversation I had with you the other day, you talked about we were talking about the training we used to do, and I forgot some of the things that that you brought up that we used to do. One of the things that back in the day when you were coaching, it was really common for the to go and run from pole to pole. Pitchers would run from
Yeah.
pole to pole. You were one of the first that would actually have them spend some time with the track team, right? It's
Yeah.
the sprinters.
Yeah. I mean, there was some benefit to distance, but over the course of a major league season, a lot of that distance running the day after the pitcher pitches is his toughest day. Okay, he's got to do the most work. I felt, and when talking to a couple of big league pitching coaches, is that distance running for a guy that lost, let's say, 8 to 10 pounds the day before pitching is only going to cause him to lose more. Now, you take spring training, and it's 90 degrees in Florida, it's 90 degrees in Arizona. Uh, I don't think my feeling is to make it simple. Out of the stretch, you're going to try to get rid of ball 1-3 to 1-5. 1-5, you get away with it till you get into high double A, triple A, and then all of a sudden you got to be 1-3. 2-6 out of a windup's pretty normal time. I would rather do sprint work. And this is what I tried to change at some of the high schools where they said, can you help our pitchers? I said, yeah. I said, what do you do? We lift. I said, I want you to lift, but also put in plyometric or speed training with it. I said, because the ball weighs 5-6 ounces. It takes 2.6 to throw it. We don't need him bench pressing 300 pounds to throw a 5-ounce baseball. I want to see guys that are get the ball out, up, and out in front quicker. I think plyometric training, and we were lucky enough, Joe, you and I, to be at the first school to ever use speed training. And that was because our track coach, Dave Costello's brother, who worked for Medalist Industries, went to East Germany and Russia and studied their plyometric speed training because they had 5'10", 200-pound runners winning the 100-meter, and we couldn't. So we put speed training in to weightlifting also. So what you got is a stronger, quicker athlete,
Yeah.
more explosive.
The other thing he used to do is a lot of the Dave would do a lot of the use a lot of the mock drills. I don't know if everyone's familiar with them, but they were invented by Gerard Mock, and they're very like rhythmic type of coordination type of exercises that sprinters and hurdlers do. And if you've never seen it before, you might want to maybe look at them on some YouTube videos. But I think that's something missing too, like just kind of coordination, rhythm, and that and that type of thing, and not just producing force, but the ability to apply it and apply it at the right time. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny up in Cape Cod, you got all different. We got 6'11" guys, 6'10", 5'10" guys, 5'10" guys throwing harder than guys 6'8", and things like this. And I try the analogy is that the young man that I worked with this morning at Tread, if he put glasses on and walked down the street, you'd think he was an executive in some kind of financial firm. But when his arm went forward, it was different. When he jumped up and dunked the basketball with two hands from standing still, and he's 6 foot tall, that's different. When he long jumped, that was different. So what I'm trying to say to these guys is that he might look like one thing, but inside that is something that you and I can only wish to have.
Right.
I mean, I really believe that that plyometric training, along with weight training, specific to baseball, will really help an athlete because you're not only making him stronger, but you're making his accelerators fire out a lot quicker.
Ray, we used to have the kids jump rope. It's
Yeah.
the simplest of the plyometric exercises.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we have no excuse not to have athletes in great shape now. If we don't, then it's the athlete or the organization's fault because all the tools are there.
Joe, does Neo have a question? I'd love to. I know he had some good thoughts.
Yeah, some of the people, please, from Neo and others, it's the time to add your, to contribute, please. So, Neo, go ahead. Any comments?
Yes, if I could, I wanted to actually introduce you guys to a technology that we've been using in here for the last like 5 years. I think it'd be like perfect for pitchers. So this is called Ohm Dynamics. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. This is the company's
Yeah.
logo. And what they are, it's a cable apparatus. It's speed based. So it's resistance along variable resistance, dynamic resistance along a fixed speed apparatus. So I was thinking it'd be actually pretty cool probably to have a picture on here going through their motion. The cool thing is you can slow it down and work with their mechanics literally in slow motion. I have a baseball attached to it now. That's at 0.5 mile an hour. We can speed that up. And
Yeah, I've seen those. I think they are pretty interesting.
I'm giving it full force there. I wanted to show you that because that I know will help with the movement and mobility deficiencies that may be there, but also that's going to strengthen up that connective tissue because where do most of the injuries happen in pitchers? It's in the connective tissue. It's not in the muscles. And that's what I was saying earlier was pitchers and just baseball players, period, need stronger connective tissue. Because if the connective tissue is tearing, that means that it's weak. Simply put, so we got to strengthen the connective tissue up. I think we probably have most of our athletes with enough muscle strength. We need to focus on that. That's all. That's kind of what I was saying there.
Neo,
I wanted to introduce you.
not to interrupt, but so along those
Mhm.
lines, you talk about connective tissue strength. So there's a company. It's right now. It's called it's called ArmCare. They've got a website, armcare.com, but it's based just on that. Like it's for when I get, it's like isometric training, very isolated isometric training. They used to use that term mechanotherapy. Where you kind of like isolate, the joint in that particular ligament, and it's got like you have these like
Yeah.
stress gauges. Have you ever seen those?
I'm not sure exactly, but the word isolation just I would try to stay away from isolation. You want to incorporate full body motions. I'm sure you know that.
Yeah, it's making a
I think
comeback
that's
though.
another
The
reason why people are
isolation
getting
movement.
injured.
So,
Is in isolation of movement. As far as like the structure of the athlete, like the bad example for the picture that you showed, obviously his structure, he may have all the hardware he needs, right? Muscle strength, connective tissue strength, but the structure was off. Things like incorporating full body motions is what's going to be the best, I think, for that. Isolation, that's only going to hinder that range of motion.
Bob,
And ultimately, for injury resilience, the tensile strength of the connective tissue is what's going to keep our athletes strong.
yeah, thanks, Neo. Bob, Cohen, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you. Interesting discussion. Paul, thank you for putting that article in at the very beginning. Actually, my son had forwarded that to me and I read it this morning. And reading through that article, it seemed like they were talking all about um, arm angle and grip and about ride and about all, spin rate and velocity. But there really wasn't any of this discussion of transferring force from the lower extremity smoothly to the arm. So, and watching a lot of videos, I mean, maybe I'm just seeing things, but it looked like even with Scherzer, although his form was much better than Matt Harvey's, it looks like when he was releasing the ball, there was kind of like a twang in the elbow and forearm that I don't know that maybe it's just the quality of video that I didn't quite see in the Nolan Ryan or Bob Gibson videos. And being from Baltimore, I watched Jim Palmer pitch tremendously. And so all those guys, they were just smooth in their delivery. But is there now more of a focus? Like, how do they, when they're talking about spin rate and trying to get the ball move, are they trying to get more force from the arm itself as opposed to the transferring the force from the lower half through the trunk, through the arm? Where is that coming from? And is that leading to possibly why there's an increase in elbow injuries, more of a force just specifically at that?
Well, I would say that until probably 4 years ago, there was a point. It's probably from 2017 to 2020, 2021, where pitchers were using, for lack of a better term, sticky stuff, um, grip enhancers, and there was a definite correlation between using that and um, increasing spin rate. And so that's gone away. Now, what we will see is that when guys are able to move more efficiently, produce a faster rate of force, but efficiently, then spin can go up. Now, there's still spin is kind of a mystery, honestly, in a lot of ways, because you can have some guys that will spin their fastball or especially sliders, curveballs at 2,800 or 3,000 RPMs, and then other guys are barely above 2,000. And it's there's not a lot of explanation for it, but yes, if you are able to spin the ball at a higher rate, then you can get it to move a little more in whatever direction it would be spinning. But I think there's still a lot of mystery behind that. But to me, the thing is, if you are able to move more efficiently and you can produce a faster rate of force development through the front leg, it's going to get transmitted through the body. Spin rate will probably go up. It may not be an elite level of spin, but it would be okay. Some pitches you want to have less spin though. Okay, when you throw a changeup or a split finger pitch, you want less spin. So that's a matter of how you are just if I'm throwing a changeup and I want to grip it a certain way or splitter, where I'm going to put pressure on it in order to take spin off the ball. So I hope that answers that.
Stephen
It's
Sharperman, can you turn on your mic and ask your question there, to the group? That's a good
Hey,
one.
Joe, can I ask just a quick follow-up?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I mean, thank you. I mean that certainly makes sense. And actually, watching a lot of people throw a sweeper now, and there's a whole lot more movement. But from a training perspective, they are training to try to get the spin by using the whole body and not just by trying to get more of a snap at the arm or elbow in order to get that extra spin.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sometimes though, where you just have to play around where guys grip the ball, okay, what part of the seam, and you'd be amazed that the guy can just change where he puts his fingers on the seam and spin rate can go up. It just interacts with where his hand is in space, and you see that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, usually a smaller part of the ball's going to come out of your hand faster. The more skin, the more friction, okay, that you have on the ball, the slower it's going to come out.
Yeah.
Like kids right now, Paul, that are like 10, 12 years old throwing, they can't throw a cross seam fastball. because their fingers aren't big enough. So if you see a lot of Little League kids, they throw two seamers with it because the ball's smaller. So, for me, I'm watching college kids put too much pressure on their index finger when they're trying to throw a slider, and that index finger is stopping them from getting maximum spin. So you get that index finger slightly off, then slice through the outside of the ball, you get more spin. You can create more spin by where you're holding the ball too. How fast it comes out of your fingers. Fastest thing in your body is what? Fingers.
Yeah, so this is, yeah, for a whole nother topic, but if your index finger is doing more of the work, you can get more of what we would call gyro spin. So the ball
Yeah.
will spin this way, and it's just going to move a little differently. But so
I just want to thank everyone for being here, and thank you for having me. I have a baby girl crying her eyes out and a mother in need of
Gio,
help, so I
thanks.
have to run.
Great
But
reconnecting. Good to see you. Thank you.
for
All
sure,
right.
Coach
Yeah.
Bye,
Corn,
Gio.
Coach Corn will speak soon.
We'll talk to you.
All right,
I
thanks,
like
guys.
Louis' pictures.
Yeah.
Paul, have a great season. Best of
You
luck in
too.
spring training. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Hey, there's a good comment that Craig made there. The transmission of internal torque within the body posture is the mystery. That's true. We can't really measure like the transmission of the torque and the forces going through the body. You can measure externally and kind of make predictions, but we can't really measure. There's no way to measure it internally.
Well, I'll make a quick comment before I know there's other questions, but so there's an article, and Joe, I can send this to you that you could pass on, a Japanese biomechanist. I think that I referred to him in the book The Arm. I had a couple quotes, but his name is Hiroshima. He wrote a couple papers, culminated in a 2011 paper that I believe is a holy grail. And he talks about two types of torque. That there is, it's basically, trying to remember what he calls it, but it's like just individual joint torque, and then there is accumulated torque, and that if you move correctly, then you can produce accumulated torque, and that's where essentially it's just a buildup through the body. And again, going back to, I think, Dr. Levin's example, it's spring, and then that spring unloads. You're able to do that. So I'll pass that on. But he also talked about posture, that posture was the key in creating that accumulated torque.
Any other comments?
But just
Yeah.
to clarify, Paul, that's going to be a calculation, not a measurement, right?
Yeah.
Well, see, one of the things, Joe, is that your posture, you have to stay in that posture to the completion of your delivery. You get out of your posture, then all of a sudden your body is moving in directions that are not in line with the target. So I look at a guy's posture, and if he's here staying over himself, then as he lifts his leg, he starts to arch back, he loses posture. Okay, now he's in trouble.
I look at posture as getting like the perfect angle at something. So even like when you're swinging a bat, like if you don't have the proper angle, you're not going to be able to connect and put force into the ball properly. So good posture allows us to get the right angle into the ground so that we can produce really good ground force, and then let that go when whatever activity we're doing. So it has to start with good posture, strong, solid foundation, and then we build from there. I think a lot of athletes can improve their force production just by focusing on that. They probably have done enough muscle work and maybe enough connective tissue work. They can probably get a lot stronger, quicker, just doing postural work.
Mm-hmm.
So earlier on, there was some talk about acture, and Moshe Feldenkrais specifically coined the term acture as a contrast to posture. The word posture, as we normally think about it, is like a post. It's the still neutral position. And Moshe wanted to emphasize the dynamics. So ideal posture, as he saw it, was the momentary neutral position you pass through while preparing for any action. And when I watch pitchers, I think of when they come to set as the neutral position from which they start, and then there's the loading and the torquing, and then the release. And I just want to say this has all been fascinating and really clarified a lot of points for me. And I grew up in the 60s and early 70s watching the New York Mets, Seaver, Koosman, Nolan Ryan. And now I'm in Washington, D.C., and have been watching Scherzer when he was still here. And just seeing the change in baseball mechanics. Again, the pitchers, as I mentioned in the chat, Koosman, Seaver, Ryan went with a mostly straight arm, whether on the diagonal or directly overhead. So they came to set and then torqued through and the arm straightened toward the release. Whereas Scherzer comes through with a lot of torque in the elbow. And you showed Matt Harvey and how he did that much less efficiently with much less action in the pelvis and hip joints. So fascinating. Thank you all.
So, Joe, can I throw this out very quickly? So, what I really believe pitchers need to do, and I'm just going to use Scherzer here, but when you get to this point, when you are loading your body, look at how, okay, if I were to measure the angle of his back knee, if I were to take this line straight up from his back foot through his knee, it's up here. That is pretty much parallel with his spine angle. If I look at the angle of his femur and the angle of his humerus, that's nearly parallel. And so, to Stephen's point, others, Coach talked about this. What I will see in a lot of young pitchers, many amateurs, is they would get to this point and their knee is out here and their spine is nearly straight up and their throwing arm may be way up high, okay, that their limbs are all doing something differently. And so, again, I think about if I'm trying to load my body and create this spring type action, my appendages, okay, my limbs need to be in a position where they are in sync. And I think thinking of it, from a fascial line standpoint, especially, where the spiral line will be to set the spiral line up. And, the left and the right, the front and the back, that I need to be, again, the rigging's on a sail. And I think that that's really critical that guys do, that wherever they get, like, I don't care. Some guys aren't going to get as deep into their back leg. So this angle would be more upright, if you will. Okay. They need to match their spine to that. To me, that's what I'm trying to get guys to be able to do. So, yeah. Anybody else have a question or comment?
There's one thing, Paul, that the Mets did is that Seaver was a drop and drive guy. Couldn't throw a breaking ball because of a low elbow angle.
We had a pretty good slider. Didn't
He had a pretty good
curveball.
slider. But the thing was, he needed a changeup too, But they tried to make Koosman, Matlack, and Nolan Ryan a drop and drive, and it worked for the other guys, but never worked for Nolan because he wasn't that type of pitcher. But then all of a sudden, everybody was drop and drive, and then now everybody's straight up and down this way instead of that way. It's interesting, the evolution of pitching.
Yeah, I have tried to just look at, again, the body needs to organize, and to me, it just seems like you should have your spine and shin. If I asked someone to jump straight up in the air as high as they could, you're probably going to see that their spine and their shin angle lines up.
Yeah,
because that's how you're going to be able to explode and produce that ground force.
Mm-hmm. We have a lot of organizations coming in and testing guys for ground force up in the Cape during the summer. You know, they take off, they come back 5 minutes later. I said, "What'd you do?" Had to jump for them, you know, and land. So I mean, it's a lot
Ray,
of stuff.
are you on Cape Cod now?
No, we don't start for a while. Too cold in Cape Cod right now. I'm going
And
to
then
stay in
where are
South
you?
Carolina. Probably head up there the last week in May. We'll open up about the 10th of June and we'll play right through, you know, about 44 games maybe in about 50 days. So they sort of get used to what professional baseball's like.
And
You
where do
know,
you do that on the Cape?
Hyannis.
Uh-huh. Great.
Yeah, it's a nice place to spend the summer. The kids are great. You know, it's the only place I think in the world where a Mississippi State kid gets along with an Ole Miss kid, you know?
So, Joe, I'll throw this out also that I had a picture up, it was kind of at the end of that presentation that I had, but it was up for a little while. It was a ballet dancer, martial artists, and a gymnast. And I have, from a training standpoint, again, if people ask me, what should my young kid do? And I've said this in presentations before, if I could go back with my own sons, especially my older son, who was a very good athlete, I think kids should do at least one of those, if not all three, because you look at ballet dancers, martial artists, gymnasts, they're all phenomenal athletes. Okay, they have incredible body control. Um, if you had to measure them for ground force, I don't know what it would look like. If they had to do a bench press or a squat, I don't know what it would look like. But they move with precision, style, grace. Um, the elite in those fields are incredible athletes. And I think pitching is a combination of that, really. You can see it in all of those things.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think from my
Yeah, I
perspective,
think some of the best athletes I ever had were multi-sport athletes. You know, it would take them about 2 weeks to get acclimated from, let's say, inside basketball or wrestling or track or whatever they were doing to baseball. Once they got rid of the soreness because of the different usage of different muscles and different combinations, they were good. The other thing too is they're used to competing all the time.
yeah, I think of coherence and integration. That when I
Yeah.
see somebody whose whole body coherence and
Yeah.
integration is there, where and then it's almost effortless, right?
Hmm.
And then
Right.
it's sustainable. The person can go 26 innings or whatever it is.
Yes.
That was the record that I found online.
Yes, it is sustainable.
Yeah.
And that's what you're looking for.
Yep.
Distributed effort rather than the thought that it's this one ligament that's doing the job. That to me, the machine model view of the body is what is working against you there. You're thinking that that the arm is doing it, or the shoulder, or the elbow, rather than the whole body is doing the whole thing.
Yeah, I think sometimes a great athlete, I talk about staying in line and being on time with your delivery. The great athlete can be on time more times than a lesser athlete. It's just that the way his body is synchronized and how things just seem to flow a lot easier. Like Paul, you were saying, you look at movements, how a guy moves. Some guys just move better than other guys,
Yep.
and it'll always be that way. One guy could have a great arm, throw 100, the other guy is just a better athlete.
I have one question. Is it true that way back pitchers or any players were allowed to look more, funny, strange? They were allowed to do those quirky things. And that now we've got a machine model view coming in where we're thinking everybody's got to move the same way?
I would say yes and no. I think that and I'll tell you, so how I try to use this, I would look at pitchers like Bob Gibson, like Scherzer, like Nolan Ryan, Greg Maddux. I think if I stop them at certain points, I can say, okay, here's how they loaded their body. There are similarities. Now there's a difference, like when you saw Gibson, he didn't get very low on his back leg. Nolan Ryan did. But yet, if you look at the symmetry that they create, the rhythm that they create, it's very similar. I think what has happened to some degree in baseball, although I believe it's changing, but for a long time, there was this belief that, well, and some teams did this. Some teams would not draft a pitcher who was shorter than 6'3". They would not. Now teams are learning through information that, short guys can actually have a bit of an advantage, and that size is not really, that big of a factor. And to be honest, guys that are 6'5", 240 pounds can get injured just as easily as the guy who's 5'10", 180.
Yeah. Steve Levins, Steve, do you want to come on again? Paul, Steve is suggesting you add wrestlers to your picture.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah.
That's Steve's sport.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I just put that in as a personal comment. That's all, because I wrestled in college. But yeah, I think wrestling it's the same kind of thing. It's a total body thing with posture and movement and balance.
Yeah.
And maximum movement, maximum use of your muscles, directing it, and it's like dancing.
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing with wrestling is that, you're wrestling against someone that is your own weight, so yeah, all things being equal, the guy who moves better and has better body control is going to be a better wrestler. They're going to win more often.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we've scratched the surface here.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot of great information for the future for sure, and it brought up a lot of other topics for the future, and maybe some type of a follow up. And how do we apply all this stuff? Is it a conditioning issue? Like Neo was talking about, and the type of exercises we should be doing. Is it a programming issue where we should be playing with the with the periodization and timing and that type of thing. uh is it do we have to look at at a baseball pitcher's development from the from the elementary school age and change that around? There are a lot of still a lot of question marks. But yeah, but that thanks everybody so much for your for your contributions. Yeah, it was fantastic.
Thanks for having me on. I
Okay.
appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you,
Joe.
everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Paul,
thank
have
you.
a great year.
Thanks, Paul.
Steve, you want to give us a
Thank you.
toast? Oh, wait, Steve, you're muted.
Yes.
I
There you
I really enjoyed this session. It brings back a lot of wonderful memories of people that I saw and do things and stopped and thought about how they moved and their body works. And it was a delight. And I can't thank you people enough for this absolutely delightful session. And luck to you all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, Paul, keep
Okay.
all those baby
Okay.
Braves healthy this year.
Yeah.
All right,
Doing
I'm
my
going
best.
to take us
Okay.
off of YouTube.